Hi, I'm Matt with State of Flux, and may the 4th be with you. We did it, guys. We did it. Over the past calendar year, I have done my review once a month for every Star Wars movie. 12 months, 12 Star Wars movies, 12 reviews. You can go and watch them in a playlist that I generated for all of your Star Wars viewing needs. But this here video is going to commemorate the ranking of the Star Wars movies that I've seen. So, my ranking shifts from time to time as my appreciation or displeasure with some of these movies ebbs and flows. But as of now, this is how I feel I would definitively rank these titles. So, in the number 12 spot will be Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the feature animated movie for the much beloved TV show, kind of shat on the screen in 2008, and it's an unfortunate film because it's not very good visually. The visual language of the film is actually kind of strong, but other than that, there's not much going for it. I like the look of it, not much else. It is the most skippable Star Wars movie, especially since you don't even really need it to understand the TV show outside of knowing who Ahsoka Tano is. Moving on, the remaining 11 films are all going to be live action ones. And currently, my number 11 pick is The Rise of Skywalker. This movie is probably more enjoyable to watch than some of the next 3 or 4 entries, in that it is just very watchable movie, but applying any ounce of thought towards that film is a painful experience. And furthermore, the film has, and this is the one thing that I teased but did not touch on in my review for Rise of Skywalker, it has the single worst scene in any Star Wars movie ever. And that is, unfortunately, the final scene. The final scene, this is going to be a spoiler-laden video, guys, so spoilers beware. The final scene in the movie has Rey landing on Tatooine, getting out of the Falcon and going and visiting the Luke and Leia homestead, where she brings these 2 lightsabers, uniting them into the sand and burying them in the sands of Tatooine. Symbolically, we see the burial of the last of the Skywalker family. And then she turns around and there's some decrepit old woman that is like, "Who are you?" And she's like, "Rey." And then the person's like, "Rey who?" Which is a question not a single person on this planet would ever ask. But unless it was her house or something like that, I don't know. But she looks off and sees Luke and Leia in their like Force ghosty goodness, and turns back and says, "Skywalker." Worst scene in the entire franchise. Why? Because it does nothing for Rey's journey as her own character. If anything, it buys back her own agency, because the better answer to that question would be just Rey. It doesn't matter who your family lineage is. That's what the movie was ultimately trying to say in a very roundabout, back-assward way of doing so. It was having her declare herself just Rey, claims herself for herself, as herself, and no one else. By saying Rey Skywalker, it's meaningless. She hardly knew Luke. Luke was like a grumpy old man to her. Leia, if anything, Organa or Solo would have been the more logical choice for her character, but the authors of that script didn't care about character. They wanted to give you a hit of nostalgia. They wanted to hit you in the feels, which also doesn't make sense, because if you were watching this from a saga standpoint, and that burying of the lightsabers is what you're trying to do, is the most frustrating thing in the world, because first of all, Leia getting buried into the sand on Tatooine, a place that she spent maybe, 3 days on in Return of the Jedi, being a sex slave to a slug, probably doesn't want to spend her eternal representation buried in that sand. No. Let's turn to Luke. First of all, that wasn't even Luke's lightsaber. It was the Skywalker saber, if you will, because it was his father's as well, Anakin's. What did Anakin want to do? He wanted nothing more when we met that little boy on Tatooine in Phantom Menace as a slave on the planet of Tatooine. He wanted nothing more than to get off of that planet and spend a life traveling the stars, right? Instead, we bury that sword in the sand, the very same sand that his mom is buried in. Remember, this is a boy that hates sand. I hate sand. It's coarse and rough and gets everywhere. Anakin hated sand. Luke wanted to get off of Tatooine. We're introduced with Luke looking out to the horizon, to what could be if he had the guts to take the next step, and finally he does. And it's all to come back and be buried in the sands of Tatooine. Fuck you, that is a horrible scene. It does nothing for the legacy of Star Wars. It does nothing. That's a scene there for fans so that we can get that hit of nostalgia. If you want to incorporate Tatooine, find a way to do it organically into the story that matters for the characters and the narrative. But the narrative died in that film, buried in the sands on Tatooine. Fuck it. Not a fan of Rise of Skywalker. Number 10. Now, 10, 9, and 8 are kind of all interchangeable. But this is where I'm going to put them based on how I feel they are rewatchable. Number 10 is going to be Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. As you can tell, I'm not a J.J. Abrams fan. I am actually a fan of some of his movies. I think he's made a couple of really solid films. His Star Wars ventures, not one of them. This film is narratively and structurally just A New Hope. And if I wanted to watch A New Hope, I would watch A New Hope, because it's a considerably better movie. So, Force Awakens is a movie that I find unwatchable. So much so, I almost put it at the number 11 spot. But I didn't, because it doesn't fill me with the same level of anger as Rise of Skywalker, though I can still tap into that anger for Force Awakens. It's a movie that is creatively bankrupt, that's just a homogenous regurgitation of the movies that came before, and I find that just very disappointing. Number 9 is Solo, A Star Wars Story. This movie is the most irrelevant movie because if you could live your life without having ever seen the movie and still know everything that happened in the movie. The only thing that you learn in that film is how Han Solo got his name, and after the scene happened where that happened to me, I was like, you know what? I'm good. I could have gone my whole life without knowing that. The film is just a Wikipedia article set to 2 hours and 20 minutes. That it is just giving you information that you know in a comfortable way, but is probably not as entertaining as what you could conjure up in your head on how Han and Chewie actually first met, or how Han won the Millennium Falcon, or how he traversed the Kessel Run. That said, I do like the kind of noirish feel that the film has at times. I think it's a touch more watchable than The Force Awakens. I guess the train heist scene is really quite good. If this whole movie had been the train heist scene, and more elements like that, and like a space western, I think I would have really dug it, because those elements worked. But the fact that it's just shoveling everything I already know about a character that I already know, what's the point? Literally, what is the point? Alright, number 8. The reason I have this one as high as I do is because Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones at least moves the story forward in ways that haven't been done prior. It is, all elements of that film feel new. Even when we go back to Tatooine, we go back there and learn new things while being on Tatooine. What you're being shown isn't particularly good, although I do think the stuff on Tatooine is some of the strongest stuff. Anytime Obi-Wan's on screen, the movie works. Anytime, all the stuff on Tatooine largely works. It's just the romance and some of the action beats that, especially early on in the film, really don't gel. I do enjoy the big Ray Harryhausen homage at the end of the film, but Attack of the Clones is in that coveted number 8 spot, higher than Force Awakens, Rise of Skywalker, Solo, all of which have considerably better screenplays in terms of dialogue and making humans sound human than Attack of the Clones. But the thing that has on all of them is a narrative trajectory that is new and pushing the story forward. And I can't tell you how important that is when you are constructing a story. Narrative matters, folks. Even if it's done badly, it can come off better than when it is like presented to you in very glossy, easy to digest, goofy Force Awakens style Star Wars. Okay, moving on. Number 7 onwards are all movies that I think are actually good Star Wars movies. And the first good Star Wars movie is the much maligned, but I think in more recent years people have kind of softened on their vitriol. Number 7 is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The worst part of The Phantom Menace is that it's called Star Wars. If that had just been presented to you as a children's fantasy film, I think most people would really quite like it. The fact that it doesn't feel particularly Star Wars-y is often the criticism hurled at it. That and bad acting and annoying racial stereotyping. All of which I kind of addressed in my individual review, so I would, if that's where your stance is, please watch my review. I'd like you to hear my acknowledgments and or counters to those arguments. I do give a pretty detailed argument as to the necessity of a character like Jar Jar Binks, and why he's there and what he represents. Even though I don't particularly like him myself. But Phantom Menace, I think, is a good children's fantasy film. It is exciting when it needs to be. It's stimulating intellectually at times for a young kid to kind of approach the idea of politics and why wars happen. This is a good tool to actually show a young kid and talk about why do wars start. Well, they can start for something as stupid as the taxation of trade routes. It all comes back to money in a capitalistic society. And I do think it's a much stronger film than it had been getting credit for, and I'm happy to see that some people are turning around on it. Number 6 is the other much maligned film from its original trilogy, which was Return of the Jedi. Now, when I say much maligned, that movie is still put on a pretty hefty pedestal, but of the original 3, that one is the one that most people point to as being kind of weakest. I think Return of the Jedi has some of the highest heights of the entire franchise as a whole, all 12 movies that we've been discussing. The highs are so high, but the fact that you have Force Awakens in existence, which pretty much actively erased any accomplishments this film had, makes it kind of a hard and ultimately a little pointless movie to watch in a lot of respects. Force Awakens rewinds the clock so that pretty much, with the exception of the redemption of Anakin, everything is brought back to the status quo that was Empire Strikes Back. And so that, coupled with the a lot of dead air screen time spent on Endor, makes the movie a kind of a slog. And something that I noted in my original review for Return of the Jedi, go back and watch that, is that the first act, well, it is really fun and really exciting. The rescue of Han does nothing narratively to tell you any of the thematic elements or set up any of the thematic elements that are going to pay off. That feels like a 40-minute one-shot short film that could have been released theatrically, because for a film about redemption and the power of familial love, you don't have any of that set up in the first one, and that first act of that movie, and that first act also doesn't even look like it should belong in the same movie as the last two acts. It's just kind of a weird juxtaposition that kind of renders the film weirdly unwatchable now that the saga is over. That said, it is still considerably better and than Phantom Menace even, and it is an exceptionally good movie, especially when it's on fire. And there are many segments of the film that are on fire, none more so than the last 15 minutes or so. The whole redemption of Darth Vader is moving, brings me to tears every time. Mark Hamill owns it. He's great. Death of Yoda, same thing. Oh, hurts every time. Love it, beautiful. Moving on. These top 5 films are all 4-star films in my opinion. The softest 4-star film is Rogue One. I think this movie is great. It suffers from being a little slow to get going in the beginning, but I think all the storytelling that happens there is kind of necessary for you to see what is ultimately a war movie. We've been spending so much time with the heroic figures in the war that we forget that wars are fought by individuals, most of whom will lay forgotten, most of whom will sacrifice their lives to not even see whatever they're trying to accomplish get put into action. None is stated better than that final battle on Scarif. Where all these characters that you've spent your running time, the runtime of the film with, lay down their lives for a cause they're not even going to see the outcome of. And it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. Giacchino's score is on point. And sometimes I go back and forth between this one and my number 4 pick as to what movie I like better. Right now I'm putting it here, but it's a beautiful film, a poignant film. I love this movie. And this movie, even though as great as that Darth Vader scene is, this movie isn't just the Darth Vader scene. You should be watching this movie for the characters and to get to know the characters that ultimately are meaningless to the saga. But they have so much meaning, and it makes you think about every other war and how every little movement forward that the rebellion makes is fought by this type of soldiers, and you start to think about what their experiences were and who these people were. Or at least it got me thinking that way. This is a great war movie, 4-star, Rogue One. Number 4 is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now, this movie I think is, of the movies that George Lucas himself wrote, the best screenplay that he had written. Structurally, narratively, it's all there. Even the dialogue is pretty solid in most places. There's some like eye-rolly bits of dialogue. He's killed younglings and whatnot, but for every line like that and no, there's also so this is how liberty dies with thunderous applause, and the visual representation of the disintegration of the Senate with the Emperor just plucking the seats that we've spent 3 movies watching and having our representation of what a republic looks like crumbling before us. It's beautiful visually. It's beautiful, beautifully acted by exceptional actors such as Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman, and Ian McDiarmid is so great as the Emperor, and he's so subtle when he needs to be and so hammy when he needs to be, and it's just a perfect blend of the two styles of acting, and I love it. The action is the best action of any of these lightsaber fights, I think, in those movies. It's not as a personal one as the movie I'll be talking about here shortly in terms of its lightsaber fight, but the lightsaber fights that you get here are undeniably awesome. And I just like the look of this movie. The use of colors, the muted greens, the vibrant reds and purples and grays and oranges and blues. Everything is just lush, and I love it. My number 3, 2, and 1 are also all interchangeable, but this is how I'm placing them today. Number 3, Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Now, I think this is the best sequel that has been made to an original film that arguably didn't ever intend to have a sequel. I say arguably because in the public zeitgeist, everybody knows that this was a planned trilogy, but it also kind of wasn't. So, that said, what Lee Brackett and then later Lawrence Kasdan brought to the film, as well as Irving Kershner, under the guidance of George Lucas, they constructed a perfect sequel that expands upon everything that was great about an original film and gives you something that's more vibrant and better, albeit dependent on what is to come later and what has come before, which is why I'm holding it back just a touch, but we'll get there. I think this movie is the best looking, up until recent films, this is the best looking Star Wars film, certainly of the original 6 films that George Lucas produced. This is without question the best looking one. It uses lighting and close-ups in very meditative ways that were designed for specific reasons, to tell you about character and what's happening within the scene and themes, and it's lovely. It's a beautiful film filled with great characters, great performances, and like Frank Oz, man, hats off. You brought that little dude to life, and we love you for it. This is probably the greatest Star Wars movie because it is the one that everybody thinks of when they think of Star Wars. Whether they know it or recognize it within themselves or not, when they're thinking about what Star Wars means to them, it all comes back to Empire Strikes Back and the "No, I am your father" moment. Plus, that's one of the greatest twists of all time, and it's amazing. Number 2, I'm placing the original Star Wars, or Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. It's self-contained. It is a perfect film narratively with a beginning, middle, and end, showing you the thing that Lucas had been afraid to do even with his first 2 movies. THX 1138 as well as American Graffiti were all about what were to happen if I were to take the next step and get out of where I've been held back, been being held back my whole life. That fear of taking the next step finally broke with Star Wars, and we got to see what George would do, and he did great and wonderful things with his moving the story forward. This movie is beautifully done, incredibly brilliant and subversive, and like unlike anything that had ever been seen, while also romantically tying into everything everybody had seen already. You have a retelling of King Arthur with the passing down of Excalibur into the hands of young Luke Skywalker by the Ronin-like figure of Obi-Wan Kenobi, who stepped right out of a Kurosawa story. You had the feisty princess with modern day, then second wave feminism that thrust her into the story, and she becomes the saver of her saviors. You have the story being told by C-3PO and R2-D2, who act as the Greek chorus or narrators of classic oral traditions. The whole story is being viewed through the prism of they're watching the story unfold in front of them, and they're the least likely characters that should be put center stage, which was something that Kurosawa, yet again, had done with Hidden Fortress, and those two characters are very much the prototypes of what would eventually become 3PO and R2. And then you have Han Solo, the only character that feels modern to, like, he's the guy to walk right out of the 70s who's sitting there and everybody loves him and likes him because he's commenting on the crazy wild bullshit that's happening around him as a person who had walked out of 1970s into a set for Star Wars and react. He's the cool guy because he's the guy that looked like a dude you could meet on the street at any bar. And he is fantastic in that movie. It is the truest romance of the tradition of romantic storytelling that I could think of. It's a swashbuckling adventure. It has great leaps and bounds forward with special effects, which became a staple of the Star Wars saga thereafter, and Lucasfilm in general. It is a perfect movie. But it is not my number one movie. My number one movie, I pick and I'm going to take crap for it, but it is Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. And why I like that film so much is because Rian Johnson did what Rian Johnson always does. He takes something that is familiar and deconstructs it in a very meticulous way. He understood the philosophies that George Lucas was trying to profess with his original Star Wars movie and the original screenplays, and he stripped away all the excess that the franchise had started building on top of it. And he did so to the benefit of the franchise had it been taken without vitriol from some fans. And certain very loud voices that happened online. That said, you can watch my video. I talk about it for like 45 minutes. I think this movie is great. It is beautiful. And it hits me emotionally every single time I watch it. Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher's performances are so perfect, and I loved them, and I loved how they moved the story forward. And the film isn't about killing what you hate. It's about preserving what you love and fighting to preserve what you love while acknowledging the failures of the past and incorporating those beliefs into a better movie moving forward. That was what the promise was, and unfortunately the promise that did not something that we were able to keep. That said, I do think that the beauty of Luke restraining himself from the fight, never betraying his morals, his beliefs, and walking out on that battlefield so that everybody could be inspired by him, not betraying himself, keeping up with his pacifistic ways that he had to become in that time between Jedi and Jedi. And he inspires people to... The camera shifts away from him once his story is told and his beautiful send-off to kids playing with toys, playing with this man, Luke Skywalker. His story spread so far that children across many galaxies keep him alive through their toys, and we get the beautiful shot of Broom Boy. This is also this is, I think, the best looking Star Wars movie of the post George Lucas era. It is a gorgeous film, filled with many dazzling visuals, or just individual frames that are just so stunning. Excellent performances. I haven't mentioned Daisy Ridley or Kylo Ren or any of the others. They're great. It put the new characters to their best use as well. So that's it. That's my definitive ranking. What is your ranking? Let me know how you would rank the movies in the comments down below. And may the 4th be with you. Thanks for watching. Bye.